Last sprint was about the Steam page. This sprint was about the game. And that started with completing the command pipeline. That was the gap this sprint set out to close. But somewhere in the middle, feedback from YouTube changed the sprint's direction for the better. So right now, what we have is an objective system that allows the game to pass orders to the commander. What we need is a system that allows the commander to pass commands to the units. As mentioned, the game already had an objective system, but what we were missing is a way for the commander to pass orders to the units. The unit command panel was the solution to this problem. So now, when you select a unit, the panel appears. In there we have information about the unit and some rules of engagement. At the moment, the ROEs are basic. We have withdraw, which sends the unit back to the fob, hold, which stops the unit in place, and engage, where the unit engages hordes within range. It's early days, and the command panel needs work, but the command journey from orders to units is in place. A lot of people have asked for NATO symbols, so I went ahead and added them. Now army units show the NATO infantry symbol on the map. At the moment, it's only infantry, but the system is built to extend. The design principle is simple. The map shows symbols, the panel shows data. You read the battlefield from the map, you read the unit from the panel. Okay, quick demo. As you can see, the units now have the NATO infantry symbol. If you click on that unit, you will see a command panel in the bottom right. It's going to tell you that it's infantry and it has a combat value of 7. Currently it has no orders, and as you can see there are 3 buttons at the bottom that represent 3 simple rules of engagement. So let's move our unit to Carpenter Creek. And we'll move the other one to Cooper Pines. So now if we click on this one, we'll wait until the other unit passes. If I click hold, it's just going to keep that position, and it will stay there until we change its orders. Okay, let's take our unit at Cooper Pines and we'll get it to engage some zombies, and you can see there it went straight for it, and that's because it is set to engage. Engage looks grayed out. That's something that we need to change. Maybe need to change that to white so it looks like it's selected, and that poor unit didn't last 5 seconds against the zombie horde that is currently swarming around Silent Junction. But we've got this unit in Carpenter Creek, so if we select that and I change its ROE to withdraw, as you can see it's going to go back to the fob. And if its combat value had decreased at this point, it would start to automatically replenish its combat value. And at some point in the future we'll actually do that with supplies as well. So just to reiterate the hold option, let's click here and our infantry unit will start making its way to that location, and if I press hold it'll stop, and it will stay there until we change its orders. So this is really quite basic stuff to begin with, but what we have now is the entire command pipeline. You can receive orders through the objective system, and then you can send orders to your units via the command panel. So I'm quite pleased with the new command panel. The plan was to do more, but a couple of comments on YouTube has reminded me of something else that needs fixing. Early on, I decided to build a procedural map generator instead of a campaign. This 72-hour procedural generated scenario would play out on a random map with different urban centres, roads and rivers. The reason for this was practical. I needed to show the game working, whilst at the same time create interesting content. Someone in the comments pointed out that this was a smart move. They were right, but over the last few sprints, I'd neglected the principle, and the 72-hour scenario was no longer a 72-hour scenario. So I need to get the 72-hour scenario back in track because it's important for content and demonstration. So for now, I'm putting the army units to one side and I'm going to start polishing the game loop. The old setup ended the game early if your infection rate climbed too high. And that's just wrong. If you give a commander 72 hours, you give them 72 hours. So I changed it. The game now runs for 72 game hours, and victory and defeat are assessed at the end, based on infection rate and unrest. The only way it ends early is if you lose every unit. At that point, the situation is beyond saving. This approach rewards sustained management over short-term reaction. It feels more like command, and I think it's better. The other thing that didn't sit well with me was the spawning system. When you put an army unit on the urban centre, it just swapped spawning hordes for spawning civilians. Bottom line, you were still getting flooded with units, which meant the army presence didn't feel meaningful. I reworked it around unrest as the single driver of what a city produces. Low unrest, nothing spawns. As it rises, refugees appear, and push it high enough, hordes spawn directly. Army presence now slows the spawn rate and stabilises unrest over time, but if you keep a unit on a city for more than 24-hour game hours, martial law starts generating unrest of its own. In the new version, army presence now matters, but deploy and forget is not a good strategy. So I'm happy with the changes. The game lasts 72 game hours, which feels right. But at the moment, the game is kind of boring. And that leads me to the next thing that needs to be fixed. The objective system exists and it works, but right now the objectives are thin. Also, the early game is too quiet. The spiral takes time to build and there isn't enough happening to keep you engaged. Better objectives will fix that, but I need to sit down and think about what better means. However, someone in the YouTube comments asked for something that I thought would be a great first objective. So someone in the comments asked if it would be possible for the player to place the fob. I think that's a great idea, and I think it would make a great first objective. The fob used to appear automatically. The commander had no say in where the base went, and that felt passive. Now the player places it before the clock even starts. The map loads clean, no fob, no units, no hordes. You study the terrain, assess the city layout, and then commit. Once you place the fob, your units appear, the hordes reveal, and the 72 hours begin. Where you place it matters, and placement is now your first objective. So when you start the game, you're going to be presented with your procedurally generated map. And as you can see in the top right corner, there's the mission timer. In the bottom left corner, there is the orders log. And in the bottom center of the screen, there's a whopping great button called Deploy Fob. Now, if you check out the orders log, there's an objective in there. And this is the first objective you have as a commander. And that is to establish a forward operating base. Now, the game is kind of in a pre-mission state. The timer isn't running. There's no units on the map. The game doesn't really start until you deploy your fob. So if I click on that button, and we'll get the fob placement icon. Now, you can't deploy a fob on urban areas, you can't deploy on suburban areas, and you can't place it too close to a river. But you can place it in rural areas or close to roads, and you get to decide where you want to place it. So if I click here, you'll see that we now have 2 army units, and we already have zombies wandering around our map. I'm really happy with the fob placement, especially as a first objective. I'm also happy with the functionality because it leads the way for other drop and place options that will be coming further down the line. Here's what the sprint delivered. The command pipeline is complete. Orders flow from the objective system down to the commander, and from the commander down to the units. The 72-hour scenario now runs for 72 hours. Unrest drives everything. Fob placement is an objective and NATO symbols are on the map. In build 1, the game is easier than it was. That's intentional. But the tension needs to build back in, and that's where the next sprint goes. I think this was a good sprint. We've done a lot, but more importantly, we've made the game better, and I'm looking forward to the next sprint. Command the Dead is on Steam. If you want to follow this to launch, the wishlist button is the best way to do that. The link is in the description. One question before you go. Right now, there's only one unit type, infantry, but the system is built to grow. But given the option, what unit types would you like to see in Command the Dead? Drop your suggestions in the comments.